Welcome, everybody, to the third session of the webinar series, What is AI? Why Resist It? Focusing on AI and education. And we've got a great set of speakers, and we're really thrilled that you're here today. I am Mary Linda Moss. I am one of the founding members of NELA, Northeast Los Angeles Alliance for Democracy. We've been doing these series for about a year and a half now. We're a grassroots organization in Los Angeles committed to nonviolent action to promote democracy and fight fascism, defend human rights, and protecting vulnerable communities. In the past two sessions, we have focused on AI in labor and AI in the environment. For the session on AI and labor, our speakers were first an Amazon worker who was a labor organizer, and then a nurse who was also a labor organizer, and a filmmaker who is on the leading edge of technology and storytelling. For the session on AI and the environment, we heard presentations from an environmental scientist and a historian, as well as a journalist. The discussions have been highly informative, really powerful, impactful, giving a broad sense of what it is that we're dealing with. The recordings of both sessions are available on the Northeast Los Angeles Alliance for Democracy's YouTube page. This week, our focus is on AI and education. We will also have one more session on August 26th that will focus on AI and surveillance and incarceration. Now to tonight's presentations. The first speaker will be Frieda Afary, an Iranian American public librarian, translator, writer, activist in Los Angeles, and a core member of the Northeast Los Angeles Alliance for Democracy. She is the author of Socialist Feminism, A New Approach. Then we will hear from Nick Rabb, a postdoctoral researcher at California State University, Los Angeles, where he has been researching critical perspectives on STEM education, as well as the role of AI in education. His PhD in computer science and cognitive science from Tufts University has focused on the dynamics of misinformation spreading through social networks. Nick is also a local activist in related areas. He has sent us his recorded comments because of an unexpected trip prevents him from being here in person this evening. Our last speaker will be D.P. Snyder, a writer, poet, critic, and literary translator from Spanish. She's an adjunct professor of literary translation at the New York University School of Professional Studies and lives in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Her book-length translations include Meaty Pleasures by Monica Lavin, Arrhythmias by Angelina Munz Huberman, and Scary Story by Alberto Chamal, all of whom are contemporary Mexican authors. Most recently, her notes on AI, the master's tool, were published by World Literature Today in November of 2025. So Frieda, please share with us. Really looking forward to this discussion. And I just wanted to say, I happen to be in a library.
So hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all. I see quite a few librarian colleagues, delighted to see you. I'm going to give an introductory presentation, and then, of course, Nick Rabb's and DP's would expand on quite a few of the points and also bring in their own individual experience. So we cannot, and also I have slides for the presentation, but I'm going to just read and speak, and then afterward, when we send out the information for this meeting, we will also send you a link for the slides, or you can write to the NELA address and request the slides, but they are available. So we cannot speak about AI and education without a few words about the idea of public education in this country. Public education in the US was very much influenced by the efforts of abolitionists such as Horace Mann, Harriet Beecher, and Henry Barnard, who believed that education could be a great equalizer that could break through class and race inequality. During the Reconstruction period after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, the creation of freedmen's schools and the Freedmen's Bureau in 1865 inspired some states to establish their own public school systems for all children. So the idea of public education was and is about bringing people together around a shared vision of humanity so that they could live and thrive together. 1 minute, please. In reality, however, the gains of the Reconstruction period were mostly lost by the restoration of segregation and Jim Crow in the post-Reconstruction era. It took until the civil rights movement in the 1960s and early 1970s for those earlier gains to be brought back. And since the 1980s and beyond, we have seen a combination of retrogressive and progressive moves on the education front in this country. But the 2024 election of Donald Trump sounded the death knell for most of the progressive gains. The history of public education in this country has been a constant battle. We have a very unequal system of education that is still marred by class and racial ethnic segregation. Education scholar and activist Jonathan Kozol has called this the shame of the nation. That is the title of his 2005 book, which is a must read. Others have called it the school to prison pipeline. So it's in the context of the meaning and reality of public education in this country that we need to assess the introduction of technology in schools. So I'm going to say a bit about the history of the use of educational technology in US schools since the 1980s. If we take a cursory look at the introduction of educational technology in US schools, we can say that each decade since the 1980s has been marked by the entry of a new type of high-tech device. So personal computers in the 1980s, then the internet or World Wide Web in the 1990s, and then one-to-one laptops in classrooms in the 2000s, basically given to schools by tech companies. Then social media and smartphones in the 2010s, and then artificial intelligence in the 2020s. Now, most recently on April 23rd, 2025, Donald Trump issued an executive order called Advancing Artificial Intelligence for American Youth. It mandates government agencies to establish public-private partnerships with the leading AI industry organizations and academic institutions, nonprofit, and other organizations to, quote, teach K-12 students AI literacy and critical thinking skills, unquote. And it, quote, prioritizes funding, unquote, for AI education. So taking all of that into consideration, let's look at some ways in which AI is being used by teachers, students, and school administrations in the US in 2026. So for teachers, we can say, and these are only some ways in which they're being used. Teachers are drawing up lesson plans, creating reference lists and bibliographies, assessing and evaluating student tests and papers, summarizing papers and books, creating outlines, creating images, writing and correcting papers, all with the help of AI. As far as students are concerned, they're using AI to answer quick questions, or even not so quick questions, create images, create thesis paragraphs, write essays and papers, summarize books, simplify texts, engage in conversation, and therapy. As far as school administrations are concerned, here are a few ways in which they're using it as tutoring services, for scheduling, for surveillance, and for identifying at-risk students. Now, most recently, we've seen the rise of alpha schools, whose CEO and co-founder is Mackenzie Price. The alpha schools are growing from 12 to 50 campuses this year and the coming year. In those schools, students spend 2 hours a day on AI to learn core subjects. They spend the rest of the day developing life skills in workshops. There are no licensed teachers. They only have guides or motivational coaches, each of whom is paid over $100,000 a year. And the tuition at these schools is $45,000 to $75,000 a year. Now, I would say that in contrast to the changes following the introduction of word processors, personal computers, and the internet that allowed for improving our foundational skills, such as writing and the organization of thought and the broadening of our knowledge and communication skills, what we are seeing with AI in education is an increasing loss of foundational and communication skills. And these skills are being replaced by what's called cognitive offloading. That is, machines are doing our quote unquote thinking for us. And of course, this development has led to serious concerns and responses from parents and some educators. In 2018, education scholar Marianne Wolf had warned us about the impact of addiction to digital media in her book, Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital World. She had argued that over-reliance on digital reading has created fissures in our cognitive and emotional abilities and has made people prone to disinformation and extremism. The antidote, she argued, was deep reading. Deep reading, she emphasized, was the basis for critical thinking and empathy. Then in 2024, social psychologist, university professor, and author Jonathan Haidt published the book Anxious Generation, which proved that the prevalent use of smartphones and access to social media has been very harmful to children and teens and adults and has made them distracted, depressed, and sleep deprived. Haidt's book has been a bestseller since then. He started a nationwide campaign to limit students' access to smartphones during school hours and to restore curiosity and discovery among children and teens. More recently, he has started a campaign calling on all of us to become what he calls techno-skeptics and get children back to printed books, handwriting, and pen and paper to read and to learn deeply instead of being addicted to and distracted by laptops, smartphones, and artificial intelligence. This year, some 250 parents groups have issued a statement advocating a 5-year moratorium on generative AI in K-12 schools. And they also don't want YouTube or video games on school laptops. And then in May of this year, the American Federation of Teachers leader, Randy Weingarten, announced that they are advocating no screens for children in 2nd grade or younger, and no chatbots for students in elementary schools. Instead, the American Federation of Teachers is prioritizing active hands-on learning and human relationships in classrooms. She called it a, quote, devices down, eyes up, hands-on strategy, unquote, and said that, quote, if we don't find a way to call this out from an education perspective, I feel that we will lose a generation of kids, unquote. So, given this reality and this level of concern among parents and some educators and some students themselves, it is very important to know how AI is different from human critical thinking and what direction underlies AI economically, socially, and ideologically. And this is the last part of my presentation. So this is about AI critical thinking and the logic of capitalism. In the companion brochure that the NILA Alliance has created for this webinar, which I hope all of you have seen, and we'll put the link for it in the chat again. In the companion brochure, we read the following description of the difference between AI and human critical thinking. And I'm quoting directly from that brochure. Artificial intelligence is not intelligence defined as, quote, the ability to learn, understand, and form judgments based on reason, unquote. That is a definition from the Cambridge Dictionary, 2026. So artificial intelligence is not intelligence in that sense. Artificial intelligence claims to imitate human thinking by using computer code which learns by rote from massive amounts of information and disinformation, legally and illegally obtained from the internet. It uses algorithms to sequence words or images and generate data that is a mixture of truth and falsehoods. Its extrapolation is purely mechanical, absent any meaning making on its part. It is not thinking. In contrast, human critical thinking stems from people experiencing reality in a bodily and natural environmental setting and social context. Humans evaluate data based on valid conceptual frameworks, background knowledge, and experience through self-deliberation, deliberation with oneself, and active deliberation with other people. Furthermore, the human mind can be creative, develop meaning and new ideas precisely because of this process that I just explained. That is, evaluating data based on valid conceptual frameworks, background knowledge, and experience through self-deliberation and deliberation with others. That is the basis for the creativity of the human mind and for developing meaning and new ideas. We also wrote in the brochure that AI poses serious and long-term risks to education and critical thinking. It conflates fact with disinformation or fiction. Its classification algorithms promote bias. Its user-affirming behavior can create biased echo chambers and extremist views. It discourages humans from learning foundational knowledge and analytical skills. Instead, it reduces humans to passive receivers of information. So it can be argued that AI is the expression of a new stage of capitalist automation, which seeks to further intensify the division of labor, to speed up production, to minimize costs, and to maximize profits at the expense of human and environmental health. AI is the expression of a capitalist logic, or I would argue that AI is the expression of a capitalist logic which has the illusion that it can do away with living human labor while it relies on the unpaid labor of billions, unpaid and exploited labor of billions of people who have created its large language model content, and the exploited, sweated labor of miners and a whole host of low-paid workers and aides. AI seeks to reduce the majority of human beings to the status of slaves. It seeks to turn the world into centralized police states, to use up all its resources and bring about a brave new world scenario involving space colonies. And this dehumanization of the dispossessed and the marginalized is not simply an expression of the hubris of big tech capitalists as individuals. It is the logic of a mode of production which makes labor alienated and mechanical and turns humans and nature into mere means for the production and expansion of monetary value. It is the expression, or I would argue, it is the expression of what Karl Marx's book Capital, called The Domination of Dead Labor or Machines over Living Labor or Humans. It is the logic of domination and control. And in the words of Kate Crawford, who's the author of the book Atlas of AI and a professor at University of Southern California, AI is not an objective, universal, or neutral technique, unquote. It is shaped by economic, social, and political forces designed to promote domination and state power. It offers, quote, computational interventions as universal solutions applicable to any problem, unquote. Its aim is to speed up production at the expense of human physical and mental well-being, mechanize and automate to the point of destroying the human ability and potential for critical thinking. And in the words of Kate Crawford, it seeks to convert an infinitely complex and changing universe into a Linnaean order of machine-readable tables. So to conclude, I would like to say that recognizing the economic and ideological foundation of AI is essential for being able to confront it. That is why the Northeast LA Alliance for Democracy started the series with a session on AI and labor, which brought an Amazon worker, a nurse, and a filmmaker to speak to us about AI and the impact of AI on their work. We then had a second session on AI and the environment with a scientist, a historian, and an environmental journalist who focused on the ways in which AI is rapaciously destroying nature and brutally exploiting humans, including miners, for rare earth minerals in the global south and the global north. And at tonight's session, the remaining two presentations will focus on AI versus critical thinking. Nick Rabb will speak from the vantage point of a computer scientist and education researcher, and DP Snyder will speak as a teacher and translator. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Once again, I have slides for the presentation, which I'll be happy to share. I have a reading list and contact information, and look forward to being in touch with you after this event.
Thank you so much, Frieda. That was a great grounding in what it is that we're talking about tonight. I am going to share Nick Rabb's recording.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize that I can't be with you in real time, but thank you for allowing me to speak with you, essentially from the past. And thanks so much to the Northeast LA Alliance for Democracy for inviting me to speak during this webinar about AI in education. My name is Nick. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at Cal State LA, and for the past year or so, I've been working on researching AI in education. And I have a background in computer and cognitive science, so I've researched AI for quite a while. But I'm excited to share some of the research insights that we've been building, specifically thinking about AI and critical thinking skills, particularly through the lens of higher education, but definitely applicable to K through 12. So I've prepared some slides, so I'll share these slides while I, sort of discuss what we've been finding from our research. So critical thinking, when you see what the tech companies are sort of saying about it, there's a lot of discourse that these AI models, these language models, the companies are saying they should be put into classrooms. They help bolster critical thinking. If you prompt them the right way, they can help students become critical thinkers. And the rhetoric, from industry is very pro AI, obviously. And we've seen this sort of proliferate into our schools, not just higher education, but K through 12 as well. And you all may now, about a year into this huge drive, be familiar with a lot of this sort of counter discourse that comes from, popular journalism, places like The Atlantic or Time Magazine or wherever, or people, teachers, instructors, students are writing in and saying, AI is actually really hurting thinking. Um, so we, wanted to dive into this, our little team at Cal State LA, and say, you know, what is going on here really? And it turns out the first sort of difficult thing was even defining critical thinking. So it may seem like something that's very easy to say we want to support, but then when you try to define it, it's quite difficult. But we actually found this really amazing sort of body of literature that's been written from the standpoint of education research on critical thinking. And in particular, this one sort of review, this book chapter that reviews critical thinking movements in the United States, multiple decades of them. And so when we're thinking about the effect of AI on critical thinking, and we're grounding ourselves in, okay, what is critical thinking? We uncovered that you can more or less boil it down into three main tenets, sort of informational skills, motivational skills, and critical theoretical skills. What do we mean by informational skills? So when you're thinking about, are we learning with AI? Are we not learning? Uh, learning and critical thinking itself relies on knowing facts, knowing relationships between facts, building and memorizing concepts, breaking down arguments, right? So it's a lot of sort of, committing things to memory, being able to recognize things in text or video, sort of process complex arguments into their smaller pieces and evaluate them. There's a lot actually, yeah, that goes into this informational side of critical thinking. One surprising aspect of critical thinking that actually maybe not a lot of folks are, sort of thinking about is there's a motivational element of, are young people, is anybody who's sort of learning in this information world motivated to think critically? I think it's a particular challenge for young people because sort of as they're being exposed to AI, using AI in school, or using AI in their life, they may wonder why they even need to know anything at all. So the motivational aspect of critical thinking is very important. It's kind of a skill that you need to build. And then finally, there's a sort of specific subdimension of things that are important to know if you want to think critically. And it's this acknowledgement that we live in a social world where certain ideologies and ways of thinking that are oppressive are sort of prevalent all around us. And they often trick our critical thinking and undermine our critical thinking if we buy into these incorrect ideologies. So there's sort of a specific need to understand, oppressive ideologies, deconstruct them, debate them. And this is, I would imagine, very important for folks who think about democracy, right, and wanting to build a democratic society. So these aspects of critical thinking, I want to sort of uplift that these are super important right now. I mean, it's not just for AI or whatever. These skills have always been important, but I studied misinformation for my thesis, for my PhD, my doctorate. And there are a lot of ways right now in this new informational world where we have access to information all the time that we get tricked and people, adopt false beliefs, buy into things that don't make sense, and don't know how to really think more critically to unwind some of these manipulative arguments. So critical thinking, in my mind, goes beyond sort of even just, AI in education. It's sort of, if anyone is using AI, how do we not get tricked, right? How do we think critically and not fall into these beliefs that are harmful for society? But with AI specifically, what we sort of did with our work is, given that we sort of figured out, okay, this is what we mean by critical thinking, then you can sort of start to compare it with like things that the language model, the chatbot, ChatGPT can do for you. Just retrieve information, summarize information, transform it, translate it into sort of different variations, and also things that language models we have learned over the past couple of years tend to do, which is things like hallucinate, they make up information, cite sources that don't exist, sycophancy, which means that the language models are always trying to tell you that you're super smart and that you're right all the time, and that these models are biased. So that they're trained on human data, trained on biased human data, so they end up with these biases. And also, they could have bias injected into them by the corporations that run them or the government that's interested in controlling these AI models. So when you smush all this together, you say, okay, these are ideal ways we want to be thinking. These are things that the language model does. It turns out you get some interesting interactions between the two sets of things. So for example, if we're focusing on the informational dimension of critical thinking, say you're using AI and you want to be like, what should I be wary of in terms of informational critical thinking? Well, because the LLM, the language model, can do so many things, there's a potential hazard that you just let the language model do all your thinking for you, which is called cognitive offloading. It has become a real problem in AI in education. Students use the language model too much and they're not able to learn. There's also, if you think about the fact that you have to ingest correct information and remember facts, but the language model is making stuff up or telling you that you're, correct and very smart when you're not correct. There's a, sort of hazard of epistemology, basically, that students may be led down the incorrect path and may be learning things that are not true. So these are sort of a hazard of truth, right? When you're using it to learn. There's also motivational aspects that interact with the language model, like students may be wondering, why should I learn anything at all if the language model can do it all? The language model itself may, for profit's sake, not be encouraging students to think for themselves. It wants them to use it more and more. And then specifically in this idea of knowing oppressive arguments, if the models are biased, if the AI is biased, that can sort of lead students to be biased by virtue of it being trained in a biased manner or by virtue of it being controlled to be biased. And there's actually, I think, a great threat that the government has said it's explicitly interested in having these AI models be sort of right-leaning, and they don't like that they're left-ish leaning. So that could be a real danger for students if you imagine them using it for studying and it gives them all sorts of incorrect information because they're controlled by a sort of oppressive body. So, we did this sort of exercise and we concluded there's all these, we call them hazards, right? Hazards to building critical thinking skills while using an AI model. We concluded that, they have a high chance of dulling students' information processing skills. It risks demotivating students and will probably perpetuate oppressive ways of thinking if left sort of to their own devices. And these models present serious challenges to students, and it puts a lot of burden on students, right? It's not that they will totally get tricked by the models all the time. I mean, they're smart and they can make decisions on their own. But these are sort of extra hurdles that they didn't even need to navigate before AI was a thing, because instructors were sort of vetting the information and picking the textbooks, and now students can fall into all these traps on their own, and it puts quite a large burden on instructors as well, to make sure students aren't falling into these traps. So we did this work, over the course of the last year, and it turns out it was really matching with emerging empirical results that students who use language models in class can increase test scores in the short term, but most so with well sort of scaffolded AI use, so instructor intervention. And without that scaffolding, LLMs actually undermine critical thinking, created over-reliance on AI. And it's really only students were able to do well with the AI if they already had strong critical thinking skills. So on the one hand, this directly contradicts, AI ed company marketing, right? You can't just give students an AI and call it a day. You actually need to teach them to critically think first before giving them AI models. And this is what we're focusing on at Cal State LA. We've built out this whole sort of program that we're calling Learning First, where we focus on building learning skills and building critical thinking skills before exposing students to AI, which includes introducing them to, we sort of built it on three pillars. Yeah, critical thinking and learning skills, correct mental models of AI. So like what it is, what it does, and what it doesn't do, its strengths and weaknesses, and then giving them interaction patterns or helping them sort of come to interaction patterns with the AI that based on those previous two things, they think will actually preserve their thinking skills. So this is basically, what I laid out before. We actually think there's a big opportunity to motivate students to prioritize their critical thinking skills because they all know they're living in a world of manipulation, misinformation, and AI could stand to mislead them. A lot of students we work with are not fans of AI. They don't want to get tricked by it. They don't want their thinking skills to be dulled. So then we give them, models of these critical thinking skills, sort of go through in more detail what I just presented to you, and that it's useful for them to memorize facts and concepts and relationships between them and show them how their brains learn, which includes going through some struggle. So if they're not struggling enough with the AI, it might not be as good, and then building on their previous knowledge. And then, right, like I said, presenting them with correct mental models of AI, knowing that it hallucinates, knowing that it's biased, debunking this idea that it's super intelligent or something, and uplifting things that it's good at, but cautiously, right? And then using that to build these sort of interaction patterns that might be beneficial, like always checking the sources and remaining skeptical of the outputs. Use certain learning patterns from learning science that could be helpful, and ultimately having the goal that you don't need the AI at the end of the day. You can use it if you need some help, but then you should be able to not need it because your goal is to have it all in your own brain, right? So this is sort of, the framework that we're putting forward. We're piloting this at Cal State LA. If you all, who are interested in, education or democracy or combating misinformation, technological misinformation, are interested in any of this, we don't want to limit it just to Cal State LA. Definitely reach out to me if you want to. We've sort of put this into like a sort of workshop series that where we want to hold at the school. We could tailor it to any other group that wants to sort of think more about how to not get tricked by AI, how to build these critical thinking skills, how to understand what AI does and what it doesn't. And then if you need to use it, how to do it in a beneficial way. So that's about all I've prepared. I hope it was somewhat interesting to you. And I apologize, I won't be around for Q&A live, but I hope you have a nice discussion. If you want to get in touch with me, I have my email or Instagram. You could reach out to me as well. Thank you so much, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And yes, since I won't be part of the discussion, if you have interesting thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you again so much.
That was wonderful. I want to thank Nick remotely for that. That was beautiful representation of what we are up against, as well as how we can support a different way of students and all of us managing this interesting time with what, it's here. We can certainly try to mitigate it, but it is something that we're dealing with. So our last speaker will be D.P. Snyder, which I introduced earlier, a writer, poet, and critic, and literary translator. I am looking forward to what it is that you have to share with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so incredibly much. Thank you very, very much. And all of you who are here, especially thanks to Frieda, who contacted me to talk about AI in education. So I want to speak today about passion, ethics, and lived experience in the classroom. And as a literary translator, what I care most about is language. I teach at NYU, so I teach students all the time. And I also teach writing to younger people. And I'm going to give you a bit of a profile of what it's like to try to undo the damage that AI does to a young mind. I'm an active writer and literary translator, and I'm constantly speaking out about AI because we face a grave peril that is damaging lives and minds all around us, especially the young. And I really believe it will end the human race if left unchecked, although I always feel crazy when I say that, but I believe it's true. So, what is the purpose of education? Students are not empty vessels to be filled with data. Although language, reading, and writing abilities are roots to employment, learning does not have the unique goal of getting a job or being useful to an employer. The more foundational aims of education are self-realization, developing ethical frameworks, and helping students learn how to think and contribute to their society. My personal goals when teaching, whether it's the Spanish language, writing skills, or literary translation, are to enhance person-to-person communication, to build cultural competency and trust between people, to habituate my students to regular reading and writing practices, to strengthen their command of syntax, punctuation, voice, register, and meaning, and improve their ability to interpret what they read, to read critically, and to add to the human conversation. I urge them to find creative solutions, not just my own, to difficult problems they face, to learn how to maturely and generously listen to other people and respond maturely to critique, to understand the difference between the dictionary definition of a word and the intent that underlies that word in context. I urge them to work with discipline, with care, but also in the spirit of human empathy, creativity, to understand that language is not static, but a constantly evolving co-creation, reflecting our changing reality. I want my students to grasp that human beings at our very best are creators, not imitators, and that we are the agents of ever-evolving forms of expression. We want to connect people, not divide them. And I want to enable my students to learn on their own and learn how to teach others, which I think is something that we sometimes leave to the side. We are trying to bring up new teachers. But AI in the educational sphere does precisely the opposite of everything I have just said. So, what can a human teacher do that AI cannot? Where do I begin? Well, let's compare me, a human with 35 plus years of teaching experience, with AI in the classroom. I communicate passion, my personal passion for my subject, to my students. AI is incapable of feeling or communicating passion. I encourage curiosity about the topic and the lived experience about other people in the world, especially in other cultures and socioeconomic contexts that are different from my students. AI has zero lived experience of the real world. Its drive is not to celebrate diversity, but rather to homogenize everything. I help my students design an ethical framework for applying their skills and knowledge to their work in the real world. But AI doesn't have any feeling or understanding of ethical frameworks. It's well known, as Nick noted, that AI lies and responds to questions in a way designed to placate rather than to challenge the questioner. I teach my students how to keep learning on their own, when they're not in my classroom, and to teach other people generously what they have learned and engage in creative dialogues about topics long after our class is over. But AI is designed for velocity, as Nick also mentioned, and to create a product quickly, not to engage in open-ended collaborations, investigations, or in fact, the creative play that is so important and has no predetermined goal. I encourage my students to be active in the world, to question what I tell them, to reinterpret, invent, and feel with their hearts and bodies while reading and writing. AI, on the other hand, encourages passivity and is unconcerned with beauty, which it cannot recognize, or how language actually sounds to the human ear. It insists on its authority, and in doing so, deprives our students of theirs. I encourage my students to engage with complexity and nuance, to develop original ideas, to sit with not knowing, and defend their ideas with solid evidence. AI offers quick answers that students assume to be right simply because they emerge from a machine, requiring no participation on the part of the student, while quietly homogenizing definitions, syntax, formatting, voice, vocabulary choices, and worst of all, opinions. So now what I'd like to do is invite you into my classroom and tell you the story of Maya, a case study of a student. That is not her real name, but she is a real girl, and a very bright one too. So a bright teenager named Maya squirms in my classroom when I ask her to think of synonyms for a very common word that she habitually overuses in her writing. Her gaze becomes abstracted. She looks in the corner of the room, and for a second, I think she might burst into tears because she cannot think of a single synonym. Maya's family lives in Texas, where children are subjected to a state legislature determined curriculum that is increasingly created, managed, and graded by AI. It offers a curriculum that reflects all the bigotry and prejudices of Texas legislators, imposing a testing regime on students that grades them not on thinking, but on checking boxes. In Texas and elsewhere, AI in schools is being used to justify enormous class sizes with claims that it can reduce teacher workloads and quote unquote personalize curricula. This in turn justifies denying qualified teachers raises, which is a big labor issue, and even firing them, as is happening now in universities. Texas lawmakers insist that grade school students must learn to use AI early so that they will be, quote unquote, employable. Emphasis on STEM is okay, but it's come at the cost of humanities, from primary school all the way through graduate school. So when Maya reached 7th grade, her writing was, in my estimation, at about 3rd grade level. She did not read for pleasure. She was quiet. She did not express opinions. And she revealed that she had little confidence to form an original argument or express it in sentences. So at her parents' request, I implemented a rigorous tutoring regimen for my weekly sessions with Maya. Maya read and wrote every week for our class. I varied her writing assignments between shorter and longer pieces. By engaging with her on a personal level, I discovered her real interests and chose texts that would appeal to her. It turned out that she secretly yearned to write science fiction. So when she turned in an improved critical or argumentative essay, She won as a prize the chance to read a short story, a science fiction story, and to write one of her own. I forbade any use of AI or LM or MT in our class. I taught her the basic rules of syntax, grammar, formatting, style, and punctuation as I had been taught them, and showed her how to brainstorm an idea. I emphasized vocabulary building, general, rhetorical, and literary, as well as memorization. And I asked her to give clear definitions, weeding out words like and maybe and I think from her discussion. I assigned her to write about topics that had something to do with her real life. And when she revealed that she had a short attention span because, this is her talking, not me, I've had a cell phone since I was 8, I assigned her to research cell phone use and attention spans and to write about it. I taught her rhetorical techniques. I explained how they would help her win arguments with her parents. I praised good work and I called her on sloppy work. I listened to her. I empathized with her fears and I demanded a great deal. Well, as Maya began to write better, she also, not surprisingly, began to think better. Her ideas, both in her fiction and nonfiction writing, became much more interesting and original. Her questions to me became more abundant. She began to realize that she too could have an opinion, she too could make literature, and she developed a greater capacity to argue a point. Last week, my student Maya submitted a beautiful short story to a youth writing contest. And who knows, maybe she'll even win. So, a few final comments. My work with Maya was personalized, intensive, and supported by her 2 parents, both of whom are from India, where education and teachers are still respected. They have made enormous sacrifices to afford my services. Millions of people, though, cannot afford a tutor like me to undo the damage that technology and AI have done to their children. Nor should they have to, given that the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution guarantees every child a free, quality public education. But it's not just Maya who's not receiving what she's owed. 21% of the adult population in America is functionally illiterate. 54% of Americans have a literacy level below the 3rd grade. The US ranks 36th in world literacy, 10th in the world in quality of education. That's a shame. It's a shame to us. We should be ashamed of this. Illiteracy, as others have mentioned, is a huge indicator for poverty, and poverty is a huge indicator for becoming incarcerated. 3 out of 5 prisoners are functionally illiterate, and 25% of them are Black. In my view, enforced illiteracy is yet another form of racism and population control. AI is supercharging these negative trends. Properly regulated AI, of course, has applications that can help humanity. But if we do not resist it, AI will become powerful enough to destroy us, and sooner than most people think. Former Stanford student Theo Baker, who is really worth looking up, and by the way, I do have slides I've decided not to use. I'll give them to Frieda and make them available to you with my bibliography. So Theo Baker writes about the covert strategies within Stanford University's engineering department. Connie Loiso interviewed Baker in an article called How to Rule the World. And Baker talks about the engineering culture at Stanford and how big tech companies are deeply, deeply embedded in that university and other universities around the country. Interestingly, a new vocabulary is emerging among students. I'll give you an example. Signal, the word signal, means a real, actual person. And being a signal is not helpful to getting a high-paying job in big tech. The next word is noise. Noise means distractions, temptations, really anything social or humanities oriented that students might engage in on campus that doesn't have to do with their career. The last word I'll teach you today is anti-signal. This is the word that interests me the most. Anti-signal describes a person who explicitly aims to accumulate money and power and nothing else. Those who are anti-signal are known to do the best and are admired by faculty and CEOs who stalk the anti-signal students on campus, those who demonstrate that behavior because they are the least ethical of the group. Scary. The Canadian company Evitable, led by AI expert David Kruger, warns that the global race to build advanced AI chips is developing a lot faster than we can imagine or manage. Our students are beginning to consult AI to seek the mental health that they're not getting from our health system or their overburdened parents. I think you can all remember probably a child in Florida who was advised to commit suicide by an AI chatbot, and he did so. By the time we see killer robots in the streets, it will be too late. What future does such a scenario offer our children? The Pope, in his recent encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, has called for, and I quote, disabling AI. Interestingly, an AI-driven citation generator suggested to me that the Pope's encyclical was a, quote, doubtful source. Interesting, no? AI is already independently defending itself, questioning its critics, and hacking its competitors. The great World War II era philosopher and member of the French resistance, Simone Weil, famously declared that attention, human attention, is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Well, what does it mean to listen to another person in a just and loving way? What is it to speak to a student with compassion and genuine interest? What is it to help a young person know that they too can possess a truth, that their unique life has value? A genuine education requires time and empathetic human contact. AI cannot offer this. Big tech seeks power, money, and velocity, unquestioning obedience, not the growth of the individual. It takes an extraordinary amount of time, patience, and skill to undo to a child like Maya the damage that she has received from a school curriculum designed, planned, taught, and tested by artificial intelligence. We, all of us, must urge state and federal legislatures to ban AI from the classrooms, stop the intellectual stunting of our children, and honor the sacred and legal duty to offer a human future to our kids. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, DP. Powerful. Thank you. Thank you, all of those who have spoken. It was really nice to hear Nick. We're grateful to have Frieda and DP here, and our own Bill Kelly, who is a journalist himself and is the co-conspirator of this program with Frieda, will be managing the discussion that we'll have for the next half hour.
I'll start it off with a question. The administration, as you mentioned, Frieda, is making money available for adoption of AI into schools. I guess the question there is there a demand for AI among students and in the school system and among parents, or is this being basically forced into the schools?
Well, I teach at a university and I tutor people in writing. So I I know that it varies greatly from state to state. I spoke about my student Maya because she's in Texas, and Texas is a very extreme example of AI basically totally infiltrating primary and secondary education. With disastrous results. I mean, I can't begin to tell you. As far as other states, I know that there are others that do. I think that Florida is also doing the same. Nebraska is also doing the same. So it really depends on the state. You won't be surprised to hear that more red states than blue ones are infiltrating their classrooms with heavy, heavy use of AI. And of course, the two things, it's not just using AI as teachers or allowing or putting aside blocks of time in the school day for children to learn AI. And I'm not even really sure what that means. I mean, what that actually is. So it varies, is the question. You know, I really can't say for the entire country.
Thanks. Frieda, you've been concerned about AI basically eliminating the potential for critical thinking among young people. And we heard from Nick about that. In your opinion, did this start just with AI, or is there an antecedent to this? When you go back, at one point in Los Angeles, I know that the school district was providing iPads to all students, and it was seen as necessary. So has this been a gradual thing, or does AI signal a dramatic break with the infiltration of digital technology into education and the internet and such in your mind? Or has it been a gradual erosion of critical thinking skill? That's to either of you.
That's a great question. No, of course, it didn't start with AI. I mean, the latest figures on reading, latest studies show that in the last 20 years, there's been a massive decline in reading for pleasure among all age groups, and that's even including listening to audiobooks. That's considered reading. So no, I mean, we can go back to the whole focus on testing in schools, reading short texts instead of whole books, and they focus on increasing class size, not rewarding teachers for spending time with students, but rather burdening them more and more, increasing their load to the point that they just cannot give the type of attention to students that they need. And again, the system of education that focuses on students reading short texts for test purposes rather than whole text for meaning and for complexity. I know that there are librarian colleagues here, especially Judy Morillon, who's written 2 amazing books on reading comprehension for children and teens, and she may want to talk about this, and including other books that she's written. And anyone else would like to talk about this. So Marianne Wolf's book, Reader Come Home, which I mentioned in my presentation, that was published in 2018, and that also follows the development of this trend in not only in the US, but globally, the move away from reading for meaning, or she calls it deep reading, toward just reading superficially, digital reading, reading fast, not understanding what you're reading.
Right.
And she's saying that has made us very distracted and prone to disinformation. So yes, this has been a trend, but AI has just created an explosion, because whereas in the past, students even got that short text to read in preparation for tests, now they're just not reading at all. They're
Yes.
just going
Right.
to the AI to just summarize a text for them, and that's it.
Has that been your experience, DP? Are you getting term papers turned in that are written with Chat GPT or?
Well, no, but I deal with master's level students at NYU, and I will tell you this, there are a few things here. One, let me start with the literary translation part at the master's graduate school level. I am seeing students who, many of my students, because I am a Spanish English translator, so I get those people. I get many people who want to be literary translators, who are bilingual already. They are Spanish as a first language and English as a first language. And what I'm finding is they don't write or speak either one well. So I'm dealing with students at a graduate level who don't come prepared, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, with any kind of feeling. And I keep going back to the idea of passion, empathy, feeling, generosity. I'm talking about those soft skills. They call them soft skills, which I think is like puts it down a little bit, but these are the human skills, the heart skills, to understand whether a text sounds good or not. A literary translation has to sound good. It can't just be a piece of text on the page. And furthermore, as literary translators, we know that you can't just translate a word as a single unit of meaning and have it be meaningful. What we're doing is we're looking beneath the language to see what the intent is, to see what the context is, to hear the music of the author. This is a nuanced job. This is seriously nuanced work. And that's another conversation entirely about producing machine translation that's happening all over the place. So am I seeing that? Yes, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing students who are so desperate because they don't know how to feel a text, let alone read it, right? They're not reading deeply. They can't feel it deeply. And also, I'd just like to say that the part that I talked about with Maya applies to my graduate students as well. There is an important part, and I think particularly for women, I certainly feel it as a feminist issue, to feel the authority to say, to feel the authority to have an opinion, to be able to argue effectively. These are also things that are disappearing. So I'm not just talking about reading and writing, I'm talking about that sense of possessing the language, being a master of the language, being able to express oneself convincingly and humanly, that I'm missing in a lot of the work that's coming across my desk. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, thank you. That is good, both answers. We have a question from one of the people on the Zoom, which I'll expand upon a little, but is what chance do we have of overcoming AI's powerful money-back political advantage to get off of it? And I guess as a second part, given that AI is here and it looks like it's going to be here to stay, what would you propose in terms of legislation, regulation of it, conditions on how it can be used in education?
Frieda, you want to take a crack at this?
I mean,
Both of you, go ahead.
I would go with first of all, what the American Federation of Teachers says. They say no, not even laptops and up until after second grade, and definitely no smartphones in schools. I mean, there are some educators who are saying you shouldn't have access to AI in schools until even you finish college. I mean, David Eggers, who's a writer, he was on Amanpour show a short while ago, and that was his position. I think that is valid. Although I myself I was part of the task force of the American Library Association to draw up guidelines for using AI, and we had to work as a group, so it couldn't be just my opinion. I had to compromise. But at least we set some guidelines for using AI, which I think are helpful, and that's going to be in my PowerPoint that I'd be happy to share. So we have to just not use it as much as we can. Do not allow students to read a text, to spend time with it, to work on their own writing. There are some teachers who are no longer allowing students to do papers out of class. They have to come to class, bring blue books, and write with pen and paper, write their paper in class. And then some teachers are assigning fewer readings, but they're making sure that students actually do read the readings. So we just have to be hands-on and find ways of getting them away from AI and away from smartphones.
I would, I feel that our group is, there's like, what do we do? What do we do? What can we do? So you can do a lot of things. The first thing is that anyone who has children who's watching this right now, you see to it that they read. They have to read, and they have to read good quality material. And you, overburdened parents who are both of you working 2 jobs or whatever, you have to find a way to talk with them, because talking with children is everything. But it's not just about the children. Like, what do we do about this lobby? Well, personally, I think that fighting in your area to see legislation that limits or stops the growth of data centers is huge. We must be doing that. If we stop the brain, we stop the rest of it. The other thing is, I think that traditional media is not having conversations like this. You may have noticed we're not seeing this in traditional media, and also traditional publishing is very much avoiding this topic as well. There are a few good books around, but you'll notice that they're mostly published by university presses or small presses known for their sort of revolutionary fervor. So what we need to do, in my view, is take the cue from the independent media people who are developing huge audiences, groups like the Midas Touch, for example, that has 6 million people subscribed to its channel. I think that traditional media is dying out, and I hope there's somebody in this audience here today who has a Jones to start a channel on YouTube that is only about this topic, because I think we need dedicated spaces to talk about this topic and make people aware. Many of the things that we talked about here tonight and that Nick said in his video, most Americans have no idea about. No idea. So part of the job is information. Each one teach one. The people who are here tonight, talk to your neighbors, find a way to spread the word, get our PowerPoints, get our bibliographies, read up, talk to other people. We've got to spread the word about this because it's moving fast.
If I may add one more point,
please.
That for librarians who are here, I have a whole PowerPoint on how librarians can promote deep reading, and I'd be happy to share that with you. Especially public librarians, have a very important role to play in helping the members of the public learn how to concentrate. There are so many ways in which we have book groups, discussion groups at the library that help people slow down, read slowly, pay attention to what they're reading, discuss what they're reading. We need to do that, and we need to work more closely with educators so that, for instance, if they assign a book, we do a film about the book. We bring a speaker about the book. We do a writing contest about the book. There are so many ways of working together, both with school teachers and also with college teachers, especially community colleges. And I think that it's up to the public librarians to really take an active role. And please write to me, and I'd be happy to send you my PowerPoint on this topic.
And I would just like to add to that, if I might, just a moment. We have to remember that we're living under an administration that has basically tried to destroy the Department of Education.
Yes.
I mean, the Department of Education is being run by someone who knows nothing about education, whose entire goal is basically to dismantle it, So that kind of gives you a clue, doesn't it? Like where we're going with this is that education is being dismantled. And what can we do about it? Well, I think we're doing it right here.
Well, yes, we are. And here's a very practical question that I think everyone has experienced. If I put in a few search terms, an AI response populates. It's so tempting to read it. How do I prevent AI from populating on my browser? And the second part of that is, you open a word processing program or a PowerPoint or something, and you get Copilot that wants to write
Yes.
the article for you. How do you look away from this and do things yourself?
Well, you don't look away. You dedicate a few weekends of your life to learning how to use your settings. If I might just say, people need to stop accepting the factory settings of every application that they use and learn to run their settings. And I would also say, especially on Word, because Word and Google Drive are stealing everything you put there, right? So to feed the AI, which is really weird. So, I myself, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm not sure if it's the best thing, but I can tell you what I'm doing. I am removing myself from social media bit by bit. I am weaning myself away. And I'm realizing how addicted I was. I am going off Google products completely. That's one way you can do it, because Google is constantly looking at what you're doing on its platforms, and it's feeding you what it thinks you want. And so getting off of Google is a big deal. So I would recommend that people just decide that their homework is to find the safest possible way to do email, to get off social media, most platforms, and to learn how to use their settings, because most of these apps have settings that can protect you from that sort of abuse.
Oh, I learned something there. And someone commented that they shut off AI in Microsoft Office. Right. So that's a good move. Could I get you each maybe to just make a final closing remark or two, and then we can say that it's been a successful evening and go on our way. Go ahead, DP.
Well, I would just I think it was Bonnie up there who said, I have a 6-year-old. This means a lot to me. What should I do? Bonnie, you should run for school board. I would like to encourage all of you parents out there, and people who are not parents, people who were parents, people who have adult children, run for school board. Do not think that all of these things will happen just because people high above you who have tons more money than you do say so. Much of what happens in our political, social environment happens at the local level. So get involved at the local level, run for school board, and show up, for your society, because nobody's going to come and fix it for us. We have to fix it ourselves.
Good advice.
And I would add to that, thank you, DP. I would say that based on my many conversations with a variety of librarians, especially public librarians, so many of them are afraid. They're afraid of saying anything that would, cost their job. So my suggestion is, look, there are two things you can do that will not harm you. No one can fire you if you find ways of promoting deep reading among the public, among all age groups. No one will fire you for that. In fact, read groups with probably MAGA, even some of the MAGA people might actually appreciate what you're doing because you're teaching their kids how to read and pay attention. Secondly, you can have discussions on current world events in libraries, especially public libraries. There's a really safe way of having those discussions. Pick an article from the New York Times, from another source that is fact-checked and is respectable. Pick a topic. Once a week, have a discussion. Pick a topic, pick one article or two articles, and just have people read it and discuss it. People need to know about what is going on in the world. This AI craze is making us so confused that we don't even know so many people don't even know what is going on in this world, nationally, internationally, even locally. It is our job to make people aware of local politics, national, international affairs, the global situation. That is also best way of promoting empathy among people of different races and nationalities and ethnicities and languages.
I would just add to what the great thing that Frieda just said. Get our reading lists. We've all written bibliographies for you, and set up a book group at your library and get together and read some of these articles, read some of these books together, because reading together is the best possible way of reading, right? And talking about what you read. Get our bibliographies, set up a book group at somebody's home or at the library, but I like the idea of occupying the library with these conversations, and make a plan for a year's worth of meetings to get together and talk about it and decide what you can do where you live, because no matter what they tell you about it being over, it's not over yet. AI is not inevitably taking over our society. It is not over. And don't listen to those voices from the netherworld trying to tell you that you have no power. You do have power. There is still law. There are still books, but you have to take a few steps. Take a few steps and write to us and stay in touch.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, DP.
Yes, thank you, DP.
Thank you. And again, please do contact the Northeast Alliance for Democracy. The link to the companion brochure for this series. It's got a lot of good content.
I will also put a link in there so you can send the Mobilize link to people if you want to invite others. But we are looking forward to the next session. We're really thrilled to have so many of you with us tonight. We look forward to having you back at the next session. And please listen to the recording of the first one if you did not get a chance to do so. Thank you again for everyone who is here tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.